Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Expat Files. I'm super happy today to have a chance to introduce you to those of you who don't know him, a good friend and a fellow freedom lover who I had a chance to spend a week with in Dubai recently, this past month. And just a fascinating guy, a geopolitical analyst par excellence, and also one of the few macro analysts, one of the few guys who can really connect the dots on what's happening in the world today. Somebody with a tremendous reputation and also well-deserved reputation, who's made a lot of very brave and very correct calls in recent years. I'm talking about Simon Hunt. Welcome, Simon. Thanks very much for taking time out of your schedule to be on the podcast and to talk to my people today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And how's things in Dubai? I know you were there for that deluge of unbelievable downpour that you guys got. You guys
tried 5.5 inches in probably 8 hours.
That's bonkers.
Yeah. And of course, they're not prepared for it here.
Not a bit. Yeah, no. I mean, nobody's prepared for that. I live in a little pueblo in Central America for a bunch of years, and we had a once-in-a-decade downpour like that, and the entire village got washed away.
So, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, not surprisingly. Well, listen, I wanna really just get your take and have you share what you see happening. Obviously, events are unfolding so quickly these days. What's new? What's happening? I know you had a talk with somebody with some good information on what's happening in the Middle East. Why don't we just begin there? What's happening? What's unfolding? What's the situation between Israel and Iran besides bad? And let's bounce around the map a little bit and get your take on some different parts of the world, shall we?
That's a tall order, I have to tell you, because as you say, the dots are moving so rapidly that it's extremely difficult to follow in real time what is really going on, because a lot of what one sees is only a part of the much bigger picture. So I think let's start with the big picture then, because I think it's very important. America has started to worry that the development of the BRICS group of nations is going to be a real threat to its global hegemony and the status of the dollar. So various developments are taking place to try by America and its Western allies to stop the growth and development of BRICS. Their problem, one of their problems, is that Russia now holds the chairmanship of BRICS. And from what I hear, 2024, they see as being their opportunity to really develop the world into a multilateral place, not one dominated by America. So obviously Washington knows this. And you could say that Israel's attack on Iran in response to Iran's first attack was an attack on BRICS, because Iran is a member of BRICS.
Is that how the Russians and the rest of the BRICS nations see it? Is that how?
Sorry, say that again.
Is that how the Russians and the rest of the BRICS nations also see that?
I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty clear. But actually, what is very murky is what actually happened when Israel purportedly sent some drones into Iran. The murky part is that there was rumored to have been, and I emphasize rumored to have been, an attempt by Israel to launch an EMP, electrical magnetic pulse, over Iran, but it got shot down.
Yes, I saw this from Pepe Escobar.
Yeah. And there was a very good interview with Pepe and Larry Johnson yesterday, in which he went into it in great depth. It's still all very murky.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't have.
We don't know.
Yep.
But from what I hear from my own sources, Pepe probably got it right.
Wow. Well, talk about escalation.
So I think the other most interesting development was Iran's own attack, retaliatory attack on Israel following Israel's bombing of Iran's consulate in Damascus.
Was the retaliation by Iran a win for Iran? I've heard both sides of the argument.
I'm just going to answer that.
Yeah, perfect.
What Iran did was to send a pile of drones, maybe 100, maybe 200, as an advance guard. Those were low flying and slow flying drones that took over 3 hours to get to Israel. What Iran also did, they gave all the Gulf countries, and thus America and everybody, 72 hours notice of what they were going to do. So it's very easy for Israel, America, UK, etc., to shoot down the drones. But what the drones did do was to expose Israel's defenses and those of Israel's allies. The real attack was of 4 ballistic missiles, specially primed to evade all the defenses that Israel and its allies put together. They successfully hit the 4 targets that they wanted to hit, all military targets, all designed to hit but not to destroy, sending a simple message to Israel and to the West: we can hit any place in Israel at any time we want. So we are, frankly, sitting at a very pivotal time in our history. I don't think this will erupt into a nuclear war. From Iran's point of view, they don't have to. They've got hypersonic missiles. etc. And they have the technology to shoot down any EMP or nuclear-headed missile that Israel or the West sends over.
Yeah, it's a cheery thought, isn't it?
It's a scary thought, but it comes back to what America calls the axis of evil, namely Russia, China, and Iran. What we're seeing in Europe is that Ukraine stroke NATO, having accepted unofficially that they've been defeated in the Ukraine, are focusing their attention on attacking Russia, on attacking Russia's infrastructure facilities. The attack that was launched, orchestrated by the intelligence services of Kiev, UK, and US, using ISIS, which is, as somebody describes ISIS, as the Foreign Legion of America. That will get a retaliation. Once Russia can prove 100% that the UK and the US were involved in it, in attacking the concert hall in Moscow, then you can expect some form of retaliation.
This is
against what?
Yeah.
Well, certainly they know, Russia knows that US and UK have combat troops in Ukraine. They attacked a command and control bunker in the Ukraine, killed all the NATO officers, completely destroyed the bunker. That was a big message.
Another big message.
France has sent troops, anything from 2,000 to 20,000, probably the smaller number, to Odessa. Russia has stated they will be attacked and destroyed. And the same applies to any NATO combat troops that are sent into Ukraine.
Yeah, two things, and maybe this is a good follow-on. You know, I just had a talk with our friend Alex Craner last week, and it's inevitable that when you watch what's happening on the chessboard, when you see France sending troops, I don't think anybody paying attention doesn't know that the UK and the US are deeply involved in what's taking place between Ukraine and Russia. How many troops are on the ground, and who's actually there? Very hard to know, obviously, unless you have real inside information. And how would you be sure? But nonetheless, the question that this brings up for me, Simon, is to what degree is the entire Western establishment, these saber-rattling wankers in both London and Washington, to what degree have they been discredited so badly, whether from Afghanistan or from a dozen possible catastrophes? We saw Victoria Nuland, the architect of all that blood spilling in Ukraine, step down. There is some kind of shift. There is some kind of recognition that these people are not only incompetent, not only criminally insane, but that they can't really pull off what they're trying to pull off. Do you agree, or are we at the point where maybe they can't, but that's even more dangerous, because the fact that they can't, the fact that they're not winning, the fact that they can't shove Russia around or get their way or all the rest, like, is the tantrum coming? What do you see? Do you understand the point I'm
Yeah,
making?
I see exactly where you're coming from. I think it comes back to one simple fact, and that is America is very worried that it will lose its hegemony and therefore its control of the world, not only from a military point of view, but the use of its own currency.
It all comes back to
And
that.
and if you, I mean, historically, empires that are failing, apart from Britain, all resort to what they think they have left in the toolbox, which is war. And I think that the focus for next year is going to be aggressive containment of China. Not only sanctions, tariffs, etc., but I think we can probably see a lot of subversive elements that America is so tuned to use.
So let me ask you, though, like, this again came up with Alex. I told him a story. I ordered something from Colorado, a warehouse in Colorado, like March 7th or something. It just got here. Like, we don't have enough competence left in the United States. Now, that's one poor example where just the postal service getting a package to you takes, upwards of whatever that is, 7 weeks. And the people at the warehouse didn't even send me the right thing. And like, there's nobody left to take over these institutions. There's nobody left to run a competent, like, well, we're just going to muscle the world and get away with it. That's my feeling. I mean, being on the ground, I don't live in the United States anymore. Really, I mean, Puerto Rico is legally, but not really. I mean, I don't see a lot of the U.S. anymore, but I certainly have my finger on the pulse, and it's not just me, and it's not just my order from a warehouse in Colorado. I mean, there's evidence everywhere that nobody can get anything done, and the growing level of frustration. If you've gone through an airport recently or had to deal with an airline, you know exactly what I'm talking about, or a bank. On top of all, just normal levels of regulations that have risen across the decades, there's also this level of, criminality, right, where you're going to shut people down and not allow them to do this or not allow them access to their money. I mean, the level of frustration I have with banks is legion now, but also just a growing realization, but there's not enough smart people left to run the U.S. empire, right? It's almost like the clowns like Blinken and again, Newland. These people are total amateurs, and they're in a game that's really life or death, and they're clearly being outmaneuvered. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but the transfer of power is shifting east. This is one of our running themes here at Expat Files, and it is partly shifting east for all the reasons that we discussed, which is mismanagement of the nation's finances. If you have the world's reserve currency, you can't behave like an asshole and get away with it. Eventually, people just stop trusting you. And this bill was passed recently, the aid bill, the aid package for Ukraine, more money, right, which doesn't go to Ukraine, obviously, but goes to U.S. so-called defense companies, and gets
which then goes back into the politicians.
Which goes right back to the people approving the bill, right? Where was I going with that? But part of that also then is the FISA Act that allows everybody to be a spy. They can take data from any phone, from any person. They don't need a warrant. And so, like, we don't have a Fourth Amendment. We barely have a First Amendment. We still have a Second Amendment because it's very dangerous to try to take people's weapons. But where this is all headed, I guess, is the big question. And I don't think it's a mystery what's coming. I think it's too tough to look at. I think for the most part, people are terrified to look down the road and go, oh my God, look at what's taking place, look at the ideas and the people and the incompetence that is running the institutions from top to bottom, right? Everywhere you look, from the government to the post office, right? And everything in between, nothing works anymore. And people understand that. And then, your so-called representatives in the legislature, of course, care nothing about what the people want. Nobody wanted this money to go to the Ukraine, and they still approved it. And so what do you see? Obviously, you have a long perspective, much, much longer than mine. What do you see coming in the West? What do you see coming in the U.S.?
You hit a very important point. I think as part of this pivotal change that we're seeing in the global structure is that increasingly we are seeing civil disturbances, if not civil war, within countries. You can see it in America, the border issue. Look at the states that have gone to Texas and said, we support you. Look at the truck drivers. Look at the rate of murders and shoplifting, etc. And in Europe, look at what the farmers are doing. The farmers are rising up against not only their own governments, but Brussels. And Europe's history is pitted with examples that revolutions start with the peasants, i.e. the farmers.
There you go.
So what I think is happening, and the leaders of BRICS understand this completely, that the West is breaking down. And as I said earlier, the leaders see 2024 as their opportunity, that maybe their only opportunity, to create the multinational world.
And is that because you're still dealing with a U.S. president who's non-compos mentis, and because the sort of dishevelment of the executive branch that we all know that Biden doesn't really run things, but that a strong character, if he were to, again, I really wish Trump would just go away. I really do. But if he does manage to get back in power by hook or by crook, is it possible? Do you see a scenario where the Russia problem goes away and some of these things get resolved, or is that just completely off the table at this stage?
First of all, you have to ask the question, will there be an election? You can have an epidemic or you can have a war and you don't have an election, so I'm told. Or else you have a situation so serious that you do have an election, but you only have an election using ballot boxes, which the Democrats control anyway. So, I mean, some of my friends think that war will actually implode before the election. There are a few other things that, what I call shocks that are going to hit markets and thus cause global equity markets to fall by 30 to 40% by the end of the year. The one is that there will be cyber attacks on Western countries' banks' computers. It'll all be blamed on Russia and China, but in fact it will be their own intelligence services conducting it, because they want to shut the system down in order for, say, 3 months later to introduce central bank digital currencies. That's one shock. The second shock, as we've been describing, is that the war reaches a point where finally investors realize that this is something not being conducted thousands of miles away from their own shores, but actually the consequences of the war are going to impact them in various ways. Oil prices going to over $150, if not well over 200. Food prices soaring, partly because of supply disruptions, partly because of weather patterns. What is that going to mean? You're going to have starvation in parts of the world, but you're going to have food shortages. And what do food shortages always produce?
Real
Social
unrest.
disturbance.
Yeah, real
Putting
serious
it
unrest.
politely, yeah.
Yep. So here's an oddball question out of left field. Is there any scenario in your mind and your thinking where the folks in power, say you can't unseat them, but actually they do sort of have a coming to Jesus moment and go, we're completely out of touch with reality. We're going to have to change course. In other words, not a regime change, but an actual sea change within the people currently running the institutions, especially in the US. Is there a possibility they like bang their head on reality and wake up and like, oh shit, maybe we shouldn't have a war with Russia? Like, is there anything like that that's conceivable?
Yeah, I'll give you one scenario, which may seem way out, but actually when you think about it, it's not so far way out. Trump and Biden will be bashing each other verbally. The voters are going to get, if they're not already, going to get very tired of this. A lot of them don't like Biden. A lot of them don't like Trump. And if they do like Trump, they're bored with all of the stuff that's going on around him. There is a group in the Republican Party that I know of who are considering putting their money behind Bobby Kennedy. He has stature, his credibility, he's got a good brain, and he judges everything on a scientific basis. So here is a guy who actually will go back to old-fashioned diplomacy and remake America in the way it should be made.
Can you imagine?
There is this outside chance that he gets into the White House. The problem is the powers that be in Washington, whatever you like to call them, deep state, neocons, some 5,000 of them, know that if either Trump or Bobby Kennedy got in, they're all out in the street on their ears. So I think Bobby's being a very brave man, but I fear for him.
No doubt.
Which I come back, my central case is, will there be an election? And if there is an election, it will be won only through the ballot box.
Well, maybe that's a good place for us to wrap. I know you have other things you need to do. And any closing thoughts? You mentioned markets. I know you have a theory on why we could be in deep shit before the end of the year. What should investors think about? I mean, 100% defense at this point. Are you in anything that you like? Tell people, sort of what's your take on what to do with your money right now?
My scenario has slightly changed from from when you were in Dubai. I think that recession is coming in America, but it's going to last throughout the second half of this year and possibly into the early months of 2025. It will then be followed. So what does that mean? It means that equity markets are going to fall sharply, and the fall supported by some of the extraneous events that I've just mentioned. So take profits now, prepare for the bad times. On every dip in gold and silver, buy. Don't hold ETFs, buy physical gold, either physical in the form of physical gold or gold jewelry, something gold orientated. Then in the early months of 2025, we have a new president, if there is an election, massive stimulus, fiscal and monetary. And that's inflation takeoff. And what does that mean? Bond vigilantes will hate it. Dollar falling sharply. Asset prices ballooning again. Inflation, global inflation over 15% and US inflation over 13%. So bond prices go into 10-year treasuries plus 10%. So that causes, and all other long-term bond prices globally be the same. So that will cause the big crash, followed by whatever you like to call it, rolling recessions or depression.
Last question. Is there any one thing that you see that is the purest no-brainer, like the most obvious thing? Is it gold at this point? Is it just like, look, heaven knows we can't predict everything that's coming, but this one you can absolutely count on? Is there anything that you feel dead certain about that individuals could actually take action on? Is it precious metals at this stage?
Yeah, gold, and I'll give one example why. Since China's gold exchange, Shanghai Gold Exchange, was opened in 2002, its citizens, whether institutions or households, have bought more than 23,000 tons of gold. But, and this is the interesting point, just recently, the last few months, China's central bank, the PBOC, set up a system whereby households from their bank accounts can buy physical gold from the Shanghai Gold Exchange, not only cash against gold, but even on an installment basis.
No kidding.
So if China's doing it, they know what's coming around the corner. So I think that's a very good example for your listeners to pay attention to.
Yeah, they are certainly, the Chinese premier, Xi, he is certainly putting the country on a war footing.
Yeah, no question about that.
Loading up on all kinds of commodities, ready for bad weather, right? Battening down and all the rest.
Sure.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Well, that makes me feel very smart because I'm way overweight precious metals and physical
Good
metals.
for you.
Yeah, exactly. I did that like 5 years ago. So I love being early, but sometimes it's tough. But Simon, thank you very much for your time. You're very generous to come on and talk to us.
If anybody, just to interrupt, if anybody wants to...
yes, where can they find you?
Simon-Hunt.com.
Simon-Hunt.com. Get over there. Simon does great stuff. Look him up on the YouTube, and he's all over the place. So again, my friend, So good to talk to you. Wishing you all the best. Obviously, I hope to run into you down the road very, very soon.
Look forward to it.
Excellent.
Thanks for having
again.
me on.
You got it.
Cheers.
Have a good one. Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
Bye.
That's it from me, everybody. Thanks. Head over to expatfiles.org for more good stuff. And check out also below this video the link to the X-Plan community. There's nothing else out there like it. Check it out. Thanks again. That's enough out of me. Take care.